Cool. Hey, everybody, it's Jason from Straight Edge Knives. Hey, today I have a special guest we're going to be talking to, Mr. Adam Boyce of Spartan Mode. He's a firearms instructor, demolitions instructor too, I believe, right? And also a instructor for Martial Blade Concepts. And Adam, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and what you do?
Yeah, so I work for a government agency. I teach firearms, heavy weapons, play a little bit with explosives. Then also I dabble in a lot of the self-defense stuff. So I look at use of knife, empty hands, combatives, and that kind of stuff. I started on a special response team probably about 15 years ago. So I've got an experience as a sniper and assaulter. The reason I kind of got into the knife stuff is we were doing defensive tactics training. And when we went hands-on and actually tried to apply some of the principles that we were learning, they didn't seem to hold up under pressure. So that's actually what's fascinating me. Although I for a living, teach the gun stuff, the knife stuff's really the thing that I find fascinating and scary from a standpoint of anybody knows how to use a knife, and stopping somebody that's trying to stab you with a knife is a whole nother level of skills and abilities. So that's primarily what I teach publicly is knife use and self-defense against knives.
Oh, I see. Yeah, knives are scary. Like, I do not ever want to be in a knife fight. I mean, I love carrying knives. I kind of carry them as a secondary to my primary, which is my CCW. You know, hopefully we never even have to get to that point. You know, my goal is to bail out and get the hell out of there if something happens. But I was doing a YouTube review the other day with a knife, and I took a pork loin, a couple of slashes. I mean, if that would have been a bicep, it would have went all the way to the bone, and that arm would have been completely disabled. And it's just scary how quickly and deeply a blade can cut you. You know, like, it's not like in the movies where people are getting stabbed and they're still continuing to fight. You know, I'm like, that one swipe would have hit the right arm or leg muscle, that person would have been done. You know,
absolutely. So yeah, there's a lot of kind of like arguments in the knife world as far as, hey, this works or this doesn't work. But I really do like the anatomical side point or viewpoint of, hey, I'm looking at the tendons and the muscles that actually allow the body to function. There's a lot of people out there say, well, you just stab somebody and it's to get them off of you. But if you have somebody that's really aggressive, that has intent of taking your life or killing you or taking things from you, maybe just stabbing somebody, they might not even realize they've been stabbed. I trained a gentleman once that had been stabbed 27 times. He'd been working for a group that rescued kids from sex trafficking. And what happened initially is the guy that had the knife went to stab him, and he did a wrist tie. So he grabbed onto the guy's wrist. The guy pulled back and it cut off these bottom 3 fingers of his hand. And he didn't even realize at first that his fingers were cut off. And he kept trying to fight until he's like, man, this is weird. So he stopped the gentleman from being able to do anything further to him, looked on the ground, saw the 3 fingers, picked them up, got him sewed on, and then flew back to the United States. But several of these accounts from people that I know that have been stabbed or cut didn't really even realize that that's what happened until after the fact. So people thinking that, yeah, I'm just going to stab somebody and they're going to burst into flames and the fight's over is pretty unrealistic as far as actual knife attacks go.
Yeah, I've seen that, you know, working in the system that I work in. I've seen people stabbed multiple times, and after the fact, oh, this dude, he finds out he was stabbed, you know, 20, 30 times with an ice pick style weapon. And he's like, oh, wow. They don't even realize it. And it's amazing to see that they got stabbed that much. And again, like I said, continued to function somewhat normally, you know, besides the fact that they were just in a fight. But yeah, that mostly what I see when I see stuff like that, it's mostly ice pick style weapons that, you know, small puncture wounds. So they don't bleed out profusely, but they're bleeding internally. So
which can be devastating as well. But it takes time. It's not instantaneous. So usually, I mean, there's what would you say? There's every story you tell, there's always other examples that prove other things wrong. So
yeah, well, it's no 2 things. I mean, I've seen the videos where the guy gets stabbed once and fell over dead. I think it was a video. The guy got stabbed right in the heart, basically with a screwdriver.
Yeah,
he dropped almost instantly. But then you see the other ones 50, 60 times. They're still fighting. Or you even hear the gunshot ones where I read On Combat by Lieutenant Colonel Dave Grossman. I read his book, and he talked about a criminal running out of a gun store. He got shot 2 or 3 times, ran another 100 yards before he fell over dead. So I mean, none of these things are instant stoppers. I mean, I like to think they are, but of course Hollywood's trained us to think otherwise. So
exactly. Yeah.
But that's why we need to train, so we know and get better, and that's where you come in with your martial blade concepts. So how did you get started with that? I mean, obviously you found an interest in the knives. How did you find Michael Janich, I'm saying his name wrong, Michael Janich, and martial blade concepts?
So interestingly enough,
the way that I found him is, I think I mentioned this already, but I was a defensive tactics instructor for my agency, and we were doing a lot of the counter knife work. And as we did it and actually applied more pressure, it was like, this isn't holding up as well as I would hoped. If you keep the arm completely straight and attack exactly as you're expecting, it's like, yeah, that works. But somebody that's aggressive, latching on and thrusting hard, is very challenging. So I started researching and looking at every instructor I could go find. So I found like Doug Marcaida. I found Dan Inosanto, Bruce Lee's training partner. I went to all these different classes, and then I also started looking online, just watching YouTube videos. Funny enough, I was teaching a defensive tactics class, and this gentleman walked in the back of the room, and I went up to him and I said, "Hey, do you have any questions about what we're doing?" He was obviously somebody high level that I had met in our agency. And so I was just making sure that he was comfortable with what was going on. And he's like, "Yeah, I've got some experience." And long story short, he asked me about some of the stuff that I was interested in. I told him, I do the guns and some Brazilian jiu-jitsu, but I'm really interested in knife stuff. And he told me, he's like, "Hey, I'm going down to this blade camp in Colorado next week with Michael Janich." And at the point, I'd never even heard of Michael Janich. And he's like, "When I get back, I need a training partner." So I started researching, and I was like, "Oh my gosh, this is exactly what I was looking for." So I had a training partner right from the get-go that had actually trained with Janich. And then I went out of my way to go to every seminar that Janich did, watched all his videos, trained a lot with my friend. In fact, we were training 5 days a week, most weeks of the martial blade concept system for a couple of years. So that's kind of how I got into it. I found something with martial blade concepts that was very logical. It made a lot of sense logically to me, as far as how the human anatomy works, and also from the legal perspective of thinking, how far, if I use a knife, do I take it? Because if I use a knife for self-defense and then I take it past the point of stopping someone because of what my actions look like, then potentially I become a killer after that. So I wanted to make sure that the things that I was doing were going to be the best for the laws and way we live here in the United States. It's a little different compared to back in the time with the Filipino fighters. I mean, that was war. Now here in the United States, with all the legal ramifications, it's critical that you understand what you're doing has legal ramifications. So kind of a long story. That's kind of how I got into martial blade concepts.
Oh, that's cool. With the legal ramifications, I mean, you pretty much have to assume that no matter what type of defense you use, you're probably going to wind up in court, one way or the other, be it criminally or being sued civilly. So that's why it's always best, right, just to turn tail and get the heck out of there if you can. But sometimes that's not the option either. So you get pinned in, something happens, you never know. But so getting back to the blades. So, I'm in a bunch of knife groups, as I know as you are as well. And, that always pops up. You see these, hey, this is a combat blade or a knife fighting blade and stuff. And it got me to wondering, so what attributes do people look for in a combat blade, or are those even really necessary? Like when it comes to knife self-defense, I mean, is like your tops for an arrow, is this just as capable as, say, the like your cold steel spot, a folder? You know what I mean? I've got a bunch of examples of different style knives here, so I'm trying to
actually hold both those up. Let
me talk about both those for a second. So when you look at these, there's a couple things you want to look at. So most people, if they look from like the tactical side, they look down here and see this this folder, the cold steel, and be like, hey, that's a cool tactical knife because of the design of it. But if you look at the tops, the way that the tops is set up, number one, it's a fixed blade, so you're not having to worry about opening it. And then also the geometry of the blade, you'll notice that it's a little bit more straight. There's not quite so much curve to the belly. So from the standpoint, if I had to choose between those two knives for a self-defense knife, I'd want something that is reliable, so it's very sturdy. So I'd pick something more like the tops between those two. If you also look at the blade, its ability to cut is going to be more better with the tops. The reason for that is if you've ever gone hunting and skinned an animal, you know that when you skin an animal, if you use a box cutter or something with more of a straight edge on it, the blade is going to go deep through the skin. You're not going to be able to do a fine cut. Whereas anything with a little bit of a belly to it, you have a little bit more ability to cut without going deep with that blade because of the curvature of the blade. So if you look at that one, for example, just between the two, the tops, if I was to choose between those two, I'd pick the tops because of its ability to cut and thrust a little bit more effectively, and also the robustness of having a fixed blade that you don't have to open up.
Yeah, that's one thing. I primarily love carrying fixed blades, simply for the fact that these aren't always the easiest. Like this one's not the easiest. If you had to open this quickly, it's not going to happen. You got this thumb stud, it's got a really tight lockup, which, you know, a lot of people like, but I can't just, I mean, it's slow to open, you know, where like with the MSF flipper, you know, even that. But I mean, if I'm being attacked, am I going to be able to, this is deep carry pocket clip, am I going to be able to get this out quick enough, flip it open, get my grip reestablished, and try to, you know, protect myself? You know, that's yeah, I'm not a, I mean, I love carrying a folder for just everyday simple things, but I love the fixed blade more for the ease and durability, like you said. And that's why I was, like you said, kind of curious when it came to you know, like the fixed blade. So like you have like the cat, which is a nice little EDC, but then you start jumping into, people are like the larger blades, like the Tops Norseman, you know. This is kind of, I think I nicked myself with that Espada. I'm like, hey, wait, why is my hand wet? I got a little, the tip just barely got me too. But this is kind of touted as like a fighting, field use / fighting knife. And I'm like, okay, so what's, you know, what makes this a field use fighting knife? I mean, I went on, like in my video testing with this blade, I did a whole bunch of bushcraft stuff and it did perfectly fine. It did everything I needed it to do. So that's where, like, sometimes I get a little curious where, you know, people are like, well, is the Tex Creek, is that a fighting knife? Well, I mean, I guess it could be, but I think any of these could be, really, if you had to. Need necessitates use, I guess, if you will. But
yeah. And off of that, that's the most interesting
thing with all of this is any knife can be used for self-defense if you know how to use it properly. There's going to be different ways of applying each knife based on its geometry, based on, you know, the handle, how you can hold on to it. So a couple things that I look for as far as a self-defense knife or a combat knife is you need to be able to cut and thrust effectively. So I need to be able to cut and also thrust. I need to be able to manage impact shock. So that means that the handle needs to be built in a way that if I do thrust into something, that my hand's not going to slide forward on that grip and cut my fingers. And then the last thing is I need to be able to hold onto the knife. So you'll find a lot of these knives that are, you know, touted as tactical or fighting knives, but to be able to hold on to them, they don't really have the best handle, or they don't align you up so that you can properly use the knife. The thing that's fascinating with using a knife on anatomy is it only takes about 5 pounds of pressure to cut through muscle, ligaments, and tendons. So it doesn't take a lot. And a lot of people kind of picture it's just like big, like gross motor skills to make it work. But if you have the proper tool, it really doesn't take a lot to cut the things that need to be cut to stop somebody.
Yeah, I feel a lot of people get this, like, I need this giant, you know, oh, let's see. I told you I got a bunch of stuff that, like, I need this to be able to fight knife fight. Like, this thing's awesome, by the way, but the Puzon Predator, but yeah, I couldn't see this fighting with it unless I absolutely had to, which I would be afraid. But like, it's big, heavy, you know, definitely gonna lop a limb off if you need it to. But like I said, who's really going to be carrying that around every day? You know, I think, you know, something like, so like this has a little bit of belly, like you said, but it's somewhat straight,
Yeah.
somewhat straight back.
What you'll find like a blade with this, which
I really like this blade, especially if you're going to use it from the field as well, you know, like making fires and that kind of stuff. But what you'll find is based on the length of the blade, when you start looking at the grip and holding onto a knife, once you get past a certain point, when you're actually cutting or thrusting, you'll find that it's actually going to weaken the wrist as far as the blade being too long. So if you're making a cut, potentially because of the length of the blade, it's going to kind of make your wrist bend as you make impact. So the cut won't be as deep as it could be with something that's a little smaller.
Oh, I see. Okay. So I kind of ran into that.
Yeah. So you'll hit like a leverage point where basically you go to cut and then your wrist kind of has to straighten because of the length of the blade. Whereas something that maybe is even a little smaller, as you make the pressure, that power is going to go all the way to the tip of the blade. So now this is where it gets the trickiest, is to try and say, okay, what knife do I need for self-defense? And it's going to be a lot like buying shoes or buying a car. Everybody has different preference. Everybody has different things that they need. So, you know, maybe a pair of tennis shoes aren't the best thing to wear to church, or maybe a pair of sandals aren't the best thing to go hike the Rockies with. And that's how selecting a knife should be for each individual person. You should look at, hey, where am I traveling the most? Like, where do I frequent? What are the laws that associate with that place that I'm traveling? Because the last thing you want to do as a sane, moral human being is start with a felony in your pocket. So you start with this blade that's not even legal wherever you're traveling. You end up having to use it in self-defense. And now you've just created a felon issue with it because you're carrying something that's not legally permissible in that environment.
Yeah.
So a lot of factors.
Yeah. Like before I went to Atlanta for Blade Show, I looked up Atlanta's knife laws. So, cause I was like, okay, I'm going to take some knives, but what can I legally carry or take? And when I went to Hawaii, I did the same thing. I'm like, okay, I went to, was it Knife Center? No, not Knife Center, knifelaws.org, I believe it is, or something like that. Yeah, you can look up by state what the knife laws are. And
so there's that site, and then also
Knife Up is also another good resource for that. But yeah, make sure that you look at that. And then also you'll find that wherever you go, it could be different from municipality to municipality. So you go to a state and it's like, hey, this is cool. But then you go to a different county and it's like, okay, that's not legal in this area. So you have to really think that through when you're selecting a knife for self-defense.
Yeah. And it's crazy how quickly, like what they consider concealed as well. Like if the pocket clip's out, that's fine. If it's, or it has to be actually out on the, it gets pretty chaotic and weird when you start reading in all the different laws, and some of them are really confused. Like even California's laws, like for the longest time, I kept thinking double-edged knives were illegal, Dirk staggers. But then as I'm going back and reading it again, it goes, well, this says it is legal as long as it's open carried in a sheath. And I'm like, so which is it? Like, and is the officer that's stopping you going to know that, or you're going to have to fight that out in court later on, So it gets a little weird sometimes, and I'm like, okay, so I think I'm good for the most part, but I typically don't carry my double-edged knives around. It's just because it's one of those things where it's like, I don't want to be dragged through court and fighting it, So
yeah, that's probably smart. One of
the things that I look at for a folder, I carry a folder a lot because in the federal building that I work in, sometimes you can only have a two and a half inch blade. And it has to be a folder. So you can't have a fixed blade. It has to be 2.5 inches. So I try and create or use all the concepts and things that I'm going to do if I ever get in this situation. The things that I train for is I try and base it around the worst case scenario of a 2.5 inch folding knife. So that's the way that I look at knife selection currently, because of those restrictions I have with where I work.
Oh. Yeah, that's the other thing people need to think about too when they're carrying a knife is, can you carry it at work? I mean, I know a lot of people will carry one at work even though they're not supposed to, but I mean, at the same time, if you really need it for a bad situation, are you really going to care if you get fired at that point? So, but yeah, I mean,
and for where I work, we'll
go through metal detectors and that kind of stuff. So it's not like I smuggle something in. So
yeah, no,
it's pretty,
they got those. Well, that's an interesting question too, that since you brought up metal detectors, what are your thoughts on these non-metal knives, like the VZ grips, G10 daggers, and those different style types of knives? Or I guess I don't even call them knives, they're more like picks, I guess, because they don't typically have an edge.
Yeah, so I have kind of a different opinion
than a lot of people do in that. I used to think they're really cool until I started doing some cutting tests. And what I found with most like the G10 knives is, yeah, they don't get picked up with an X-ray. However, they don't really cut as well as a knife does oftentimes. And oftentimes when they make more of like a nice pick style G10, you'll find that the tip is usually not super sharp. So like, for example, I have over here, I think this is a cold steel, and this is, I mean, you can buy these on Amazon. It's just,
yeah,
see it there. But I found even the tip on this isn't really fine enough to really penetrate super well. And then as far as the edge geometry of it, they don't really cut very well either. So I've actually been super disappointed as far as G10 and plastic blades. And then the other side of it is they're not super strong. So running this on something like maybe like a pork medium or something like that, you'll find that often they'll break on you as well, depending on the material. And that's the last thing you want, is you're going to be using a tool and all of a sudden it's broken. The other thing that I'm not a big fan of the knives that are made currently for non-permissive environments is, let's say again that you are somebody that tries your best to uphold the laws like you and I do, and you have one of those knives and you enter into an area where they're not permissible, and then it's found that you have that knife. I've heard cases where they actually look at it like, hey, you purposefully tried to sneak this in. So you tried to hide it by making sure it wasn't metal. So it shows another level of intent. So from that aspect, it can also be a legal issue of, okay, this guy is purposely trying to smuggle something in here he wasn't supposed to. So the right lawyer, if that's the case, could look at that and be like, hey, this guy is just looking to break the law. So obviously there's spins and things all different around, but for that reason, I'm not a big fan of those style blades. But again, it's personal preference, but that's where I'm at with it.
That was a good point. I never thought about them looking at the intent of it, you know. So in that case, if you, I mean, I don't like going into places where I don't have at least some sort of a force multiplier, not because this is a crazy world, right? So in that case, would you say it would be like a more advisable tool would be, say, like one of these tactical pens, or an all metal pen, if you will?
Yeah, so I'm glad you mentioned that. So one of the things that I look at is because of the training that I do, and anybody can train this way, but I can look at basically any object can become a weapon if used properly. Once you understand the concepts of how different things are used, everything becomes a weapon to an extent. So I'm a big fan of all metal pens. One company I really like is Tough Rider pens. They make really robust, fancy, just beautiful pens. You can buy the Zebra pens for like $10. Just make sure it's doesn't have that plastic insert where they screw together. It's got to be a full metal. Otherwise, when you make impact, it's going to break on you. Flashlights. I'm a really big fan of a flashlight. Pack a flashlight almost everywhere I go. On a plane, I'll take a flashlight. It's not a problem. So those are the big things that I'll take into places that don't allow weapons. They're usually pens and flashlights.
I typically carry a flashlight on me as well now. That's one of the things I started doing. And then, you know, I have I don't know, it's like a Smith and Wesson pin, but it's all metal. Like, so I actually just recently purchased the the Phoenix pin, but it's all metal, but it's got the little light on it. So that's kind of, so that's pretty cool. It's unassuming, if you will. So
well, from the standpoint of like a flashlight, I use my flashlight every day, all the time. You know, in the evening, I'm, you know, whatever, I'll use a flashlight to find things, or they're just very practical. You have a more likelihood of needing that than a knife or a gun in most cases anyway. So
I know I found myself using my flashlight a ton. So not only in my job, but just I'm like, oh, where's my flashlight? There it is. So
on that note, let me add a couple things where we talk about, see if I have any in here. I've got kind of a bag of gear. Actually, here's a G10 knife. Again, cutting with this, I wasn't super impressed with it. even a marker, a Sharpie like this, something like this, that you can kind of make a fist load or something you can impact with, is a great tool to take into places. See if I know I've got it in here somewhere.
And those Sharpies, I mean, you could probably hit a concrete wall and not really even break that. You know, I mean, they whatever they make the bodies of those Sharpies out of, it's pretty damn tough.
Yep. So I don't have my other pen here with me in my office, but if you look at this pen, this is one of the first tactical pens I bought, and I was all excited for it. You know, it's Uzi. It says Uzi on the side. It's got a glass break on the top. There's a hidden handcuff key. It's all gnarled here for grip. But what I found when I try to take this places is people look at that and they're like, Uzi, and then this big sharp point just looks like a tactical knife. It looks like something that is made purposely for self-defense. Also, if you go to get a good grip, so to use a pen as a self-defense tool, one of the things you can do is do a fist load and then put your thumb on the back of it. So the idea behind putting the thumb is if you make impact, it doesn't slide down and you can put more of that force. But what I found is a lot of these tactical pens have things like this glass break. So now when you put your thumb on the back and make impact, it's actually hurting your thumb. So again, I'm a bigger fan of something like a Zebra or a Tough Rider. That's just a really nice, well-made pen that's just a solid body. Again, that's a personal preference, but I've heard of a lot of friends that will have pens like this that maybe are like a Sig Sauer or Smith & Wesson, and it says that right on the side. And then when they go through like the airport security or something like that, they're like, hey, that's a, you know, they've kind of caught on to it and they're like, hey, that's a weapon. That's not a pen. So
yeah. Oh, that's a good point. You definitely want everything to look unassuming, right?
Yeah. I
know it's looking at like, so recently I've just started messing around with like carrying a fanny pack, right? You know, and for my CCW, just because I always had so much crap in my pockets, I felt like, but you know, I'm looking at the bag and I'm like, all these bags, and I'm like, well, that just screams I got a gun. That screams I got a gun. That's, you know what I mean? So like, I'm like trying to find a good CCW one that's gonna fit the bill, but also look pretty unassuming as well. You know, I know yours does. I remember, you know, you had yours on at SHOT Show, and you're like, of course, yours was full of stickers and patches at the time. But
well, I actually, on that note, I think you saw it with that, but I actually took
a piece of Velcro backing with the sticky on the back, so you can have a adhesive for a patch, and I put a first aid patch right on the front of mine, so it's my medic bag or my first aid kit. And I think that's kind of just playing the part as far as you look at it, and it's just like, oh, that's a first aid kit inside of there. I got to do some work with the group that rescues kids from trafficking, and they had kind of a training thing, and the way they set up stuff is they purposely put like things that a tourist looking to purchase kids for bad things. They put things on the top of their bag, so when they're searched, it was very much like, okay, this is really fitting the bill of this individual. So I think off of what you're saying, not being assuming, that's one of the hardest parts with all this is if you carry a knife or a gun, criminals know what to look for. They know those things, and it will flag you as carrying a gun. So that is a good point you bring up, is how do you find something that doesn't scream, hey, I'm carrying, especially in a state where there's maybe less, what would you say, where people aren't as supportive of those that are willing to defend themselves and those they love.
Yeah. Well, I'm one of those great places. Luckily the area we're in is a little bit more on the friendlier side. But
yeah,
I mean, it makes me nervous traveling sometimes, like in my own state. Like if I go up north from, you know, if I go to the Bay Area or something, like I know they do not want you. I mean, they didn't even want their own police officers carrying at one point. So, you know, and I'm like,
I remember being in San Francisco
a couple of years ago, and I was teaching a seminar there. And after the seminar was over, the gentleman that hosted me, great guy, he's like, hey, you want to go to the beach? And I said, yeah. And so on the way there, he's like, hey, we got to pull over. We got to put the bags in the trunk before we get there, because once we get there, anybody that sees us get into the vehicle, they're going to know what to look for, and they'll break into the vehicle. So anyway, we put all the bags in the back, and then we drive to the parking lot right by the beach. And like every other parking lot or spot, it seemed like had broken glass. And I was like, what is this about? It's like everybody's car's getting broken into. He's like, yeah, that's why we had to hide this stuff. So we drove, all those spots were full. So we drove up the hill just a little bit, and there's a police officer parked up there. And we parked, and the officer got out, and she's like, "Hey, did you take out every valuable that's visible in the front of the car? Like backpacks, iPhone chargers, everything." And we're like, "Yeah, we took everything out." She's like, "Good." She's like, "I've seen 3 break-ins today where people just break the window to get an iPhone charger because they can get $5 for drugs, and there is nothing that I can do about it." So their hands are really tied in a lot of these places as far as being able actually to protect you. So that's why it's so critical that you become your own defender and learn what tools you can use legally and lawfully in places like you're talking about, because the world's getting crazier from that standpoint, it feels.
Yeah, I mean, even the smash and grabs, the massive, people rushing into the stores and stealing everything. I mean, who knows? I mean, you could be at the mall just buying school clothes and that happens, but you don't know if that could turn super violent very quickly. I mean, they may just be robbing stuff, but all it takes is that one person to escalate it, and that mob mentality kicks in, and
Yeah.
what are you going to do? That's what's always scary. So you have your blade with tops knives, the Agogi.
Yep.
I know you've been sold out of those for a while. Do you have any of those coming up pretty soon, or?
I don't currently. I'm
Working on a smaller version. It's a smaller blade. Again, going back to where I work, you can only have a 2.5-inch blade. So we decided, there's a lot of bigger knives out there, and I wanted to build something that's a more purpose-built, smaller blade. So we've got a smaller one coming out soon, but it'll still be a few months. So,
yeah.
Yep,
is that going to be through Tops, or is it going to be through?
Yep, that one's going to be through Tops. It will be kind of like with my Agogi, as far as they make them for me and then I sell them. So it won't be a product line. The one that they will be doing, you saw this at Blade Show. We don't officially have a name for it yet, but this Ganung team, like a Filipino fighting sword, this is kind of a design that I worked with Craig and Leo at Tops. I was going to be on a TV show on the History Channel a few years ago, and I needed something that was very capable. And so we kind of came up with that design. They built it for me. And sounds like this next year, probably it's going to come out into production. And there's a lot of interest in it so far. It sounds like at Blade Show. So I'm really excited about that one.
Yeah, I saw, I was working at Blade Show and with Tops, and I saw a lot of people were picking that thing up. And, it's something about giant blades. It's just, they're fun. They make you smile. I mean, they make me smile. I mean, every time I grab, like Kumakaje, it makes you, it's just like, you just start giggling because it just reminds you, to me, somebody in a knife group posted this. They're like, it was, I think it were a couple of Bastianelli knives that were they looked like little mini size. I can't remember what they were called, but they're like, hey, I really want these, but I don't need them. Like, there's what practical use. And I was like, dude, you don't have to have a practical use. Sometimes blades like that just make you go back to your childhood when you were sitting in front of the TV watching ninja movies and eating popcorn with your friends. And, sometimes having blades like that, or even though you don't have a practical use for it, it takes you back to a time when you were a kid, carefree, living life, and it's fun to just sit there and hold them and maybe throw that old movie on and just hold it while you're watching the ninja movie or something, If it makes you happy, why not buy it, So
why not? Well,
yeah.
Off that note,
this is the original prototype for that blade. So I'm real excited from the standpoint of when we did all the testing on it, we tried to break this every way in which way that we could. We took it up into the hills. We had recently had a fire up here in the hills where I was at, and there was a bunch of trees. So I chopped down trees for like 30 minutes straight, just chopping, trying to get the trees cut. And then I took an old rubber tire, and they've got the metal beading, the beads inside the tire, and tried to cut through a tire, and then 2-inch rope, slice through it like it was nothing, and then cut a fish in half and steal a slice in paper after all that. But because of the design on this, the way that the weight's distributed, as you make, like a chopping motion, the weight kind of hurls down and makes that chop even bigger. And the geometry of the blade, basing it off of a Filipino fighter, is traditionally, or most knives are long blades, when you go to thrust or to stab with them, if you were to aim here, what happens is as you thrust your wrist angle with most knives, puts it in a manner so it's going to be higher. But the way that this is designed is wherever I point is where that blade will penetrate. So kind of a lot of fun things with this knife, and I'm super excited for it to be out in the public's hands. It should be fun.
So from the prototype to the somewhat production one that's next to it, are they the same? Because I noticed the one that I held at Blade Show, it had some heft to it. It was a beefy boy for sure.
Yeah.
Were they able to carry that over?
So yeah, it's a lot the same. The finish is going to be different on the new blade. They're going to do kind of that sand, what do they call that? That gritty finish. The idea behind it with a blade that big is they wanted something that was going to kind of hold up and wear well, because most people that use this, again, it's probably not for fighting off zombies, but you probably take it camping and, you know, cut down some firewood with it, and maybe kind of just more of like a survival knife. The one thing that is different is I wanted the handles to be a little bit thinner because it is such a big beefy blade. And it looks like we're going to be putting liners on this just for the color on it. Yeah. So that's kind of the big difference. And then just the finish. But other than that, everything is pretty close as far as the length and the weight and everything else with it. So basically just thinner handle, a little bit thicker handle with the liners, and the finish coat will be kind of the difference on it.
But if somebody wants a thinner handle, if they get the Rocky Mountain tread put on there, that'll thin the handle out a decent amount too. Because I noticed that on all my blades that I have Rocky Mountain tread.
Oh, really?
The handles are thinner.
Yeah.
I have one somewhere in here. My Tex Creek, I did that. So I have almost all the Tex Creeks. And if I take my Rocky Mountain tread one and hold it up to the others, you can tell it gives it a thinner profile.
Oh, that's awesome.
So it's something I guess people may or may not know, but
yeah, I'll have to recommend that, because I do
like that Rocky Mountain tread. It's kind of like a more aggressive with the kind of cutouts, right? So
yeah. So like I have this top Ranger's Edge.
Yep.
It's got the Rocky Mountain.
Oh yeah. Yep.
But because they do it, that when they're coming in and scalping out, it does thin the handle up a little bit. So that's compared awesome. To that's pretty. A lot of times when people say, "Hey, you know, like a thinner handle one," send it in and get the Rocky Mountain tread put on there. It'll thin it out a little bit if you want a thinner handle, or hit somebody up to make you custom scales. But yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, that Gununting that's pretty awesome, man. That thing is definitely going to be a chopper with the weight behind it. You should be able to blast through trees like easily with it.
I'm curious as far as, you know,
well, like one of my favorite tops knives is El Chete, because of its just chopping power. So I'm really curious as far as how this will compare in that one. I mean, this obviously has some differences where there's a little bit more thrusting with it, but I think the weight of it's going to make it kind of fun. So,
well, when I get one, I'll do a video, a chop off with El Chete and the Gununting. Actually, awesome. I did a chop off video with a bunch of blades a while back, and I definitely learned from that. I tried to do them all in one day, and by the time I got to the end, I was my arm was dead. I was like, I couldn't hardly chop. So I didn't really, unfortunately, I even say it at the end of the video, like I don't feel like the knives all got an equal, playing ground. So I should have just maybe did 2 blades a day over the course of 3 days or something. Yeah. So that was my plan. I plan on taking some of my choppers and just doing these 2 at a time, but I would definitely take the Gununting and El Chete and do that. Yeah. Take some nice big round pieces. I got some seasoned almond wood too. So definitely that stuff is tough. I mean, yeah. So it's always a pain to chop through that stuff, but yeah, that's awesome. That blade, that's really cool. And like I said, at Blade Show, a lot of people were looking at it, picking it up. A lot of people wanted to buy it right then, I wanted to buy it right then.
The Facebook page when that was shared, and as far back as I could tell, I think it was the most shared blade I've seen in a long time. There's a lot of interest, so we'll see how it does, but I think it'll do good.
I know EDC blades are obviously great and super popular, but I think a lot of people like big blades. I mean, like I said, a lot of people don't have maybe a use for them, but they like them. I do. I mean, I love big blades. I got a bunch of them. I mean, I just love them. They're, get Prather War Boy.
I love that
knife. That's a good knife.
Yeah, so I haven't had a chance to actually do a testing video with this one yet. I just got it not too long ago. So, but yeah, this one, I mean, I love the feel of it. I'm actually, did you see that Sterling F. Buster, the fighting rooster guy? His family, they make mostly like case style folders.
Okay.
But Topps made a couple of blades for him in the past. And anyway, he's got a new one coming out called the Sandbar Bowie. And it's got a coffin handle to it. And then, but it's like a Bowie style blade, but it's thinner. Like it's not as wide as this. It's more of a slim down Bowie. That one looks pretty good. I'm in contact with that guy trying to see if I can't get one of those to check out. But that's looks pretty cool. Like, but yeah, I'm always, I got so many knives, it's ridiculous. I probably bought like way a ton of them out here. So, but then I'm still working on building my own knives too. So
that's awesome.
But do you have any seminars or anything coming up in California soon?
California, nothing.
I need to probably schedule something down there. The next few things I've got are just are private. I've been doing a lot more private courses lately. Kind of selfish reasons. As people will just say, hey, we want you to come out and teach us a private seminar. And I don't have to do any advertising. I don't have to figure out logistics. And it's actually a lot of fun. However, I miss with the public seminars. There usually, 30, 40 people will come to the seminars I do. And I do kind of miss meeting new people and being with a group that big is a lot of fun. So I have plans to push more public seminars again soon, but I've been kind of tied up with a bunch of other behind the scenes projects. So it's been, yeah.
Well, that's always a good thing. So
yeah.
As long as you're staying busy, right? I mean, that's what, so, and then that's with the martial blade concept stuff. Do you also do your firearms training as well on the outside, or is it just strictly kind of limited to your the place you work?
Yeah, so
firearms, I teach mostly that stuff at work. However, I am starting to branch out and do more public seminars with their classes with the firearm. And actually, now that you just mentioned California, I did forget I had a group from San Diego reach out to me a couple of weeks ago that's looking at bringing me there. So I guess I do have something in California, but it's not finalized yet.
Oh, okay.
But yeah. Firearms, empty hands. I'm putting together a couple different courses right now that will kind of combine both the knife, gun, and empty hands with the situational awareness piece of it too. So that's kind of where I'm going with some of the public stuff as well.
Oh, that'd be really awesome. I mean, because like in my case, I do carry a gun, I do carry a knife, and obviously we have our hands. So I mean, oftentimes I go to a class it's strictly gun. Actually, I haven't ever even been to a knife class because nowhere around me really offers it. So but so that would be awesome. The situational. I really like to focus. Like if I go to a class, I like to focus on what's. I don't need to be Delta Force operator guy. I need to be. I'm at the mall guy. You know what I mean? Like just watching out for me and my family. So that'd be really cool to see a class like that. So obviously, if you do something like that down in San Diego, you'll have that posted on your website if it's a public class. So. I'll put a link to Spartan Mode definitely in the comments below on the video, so people can go find you there.
Awesome.
And sign up for your email. You have an email sign up too, I believe, don't you?
Yeah, if you just go to spartanmode.com,
when you go to click off, it will ask if you want to join the email list, so you can just put your email in right then.
Okay, awesome.
Yeah.
Great, man. So next question I have for you real quick before we finish up is you going to be at Blade Show West?
Yeah, I will be at
Blade Show West, and there might be a seminar while we're there. So that's something we're actually working on right now, is having an evening seminar during Blade Show West as well. So
oh, awesome. So okay, I definitely got to try to make it out there then. So I've been kicking around. I mean, I have a big trip the weekend before, so I'm like, okay, can I do this and also turn around and backtrack and make it out to Blade Show West? So, but
sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
I was gonna say last year was the first time I've been to Blade Show West, because I think before it was like in Oregon or something like that. It wasn't like Portland or
no. There was for a long time. It was in Oregon, and then right after kind of COVID was ending, it was in Long Beach. Long Beach. That was the first one I went to, and then they moved it to Salt Lake. So
yeah, so that was the first one, West one I've been to, and I was really impressed with it. It was, you know, a lot of knife vendors and makers, and just really good people. So if people have interest in going to Blade Show, I'd highly recommend Blade Show West. It's a good time.
yeah, Atlanta was the Blade Show. Atlanta was the first Atlanta one for me, and that was pretty awesome. I was thoroughly impressed with that as well. So the one in Long Beach I went to, it was kind of a weird time. So there was a lot of companies that didn't come out, and it was still fun. I still met a lot of great people, but again, that's one of the things I wanted to touch on real quick was, you know, when I met you first time at SHOT Show a couple of years ago, dude, you're just such a nice guy, man. Like you're so polite and easy to talk to. You know what I mean? I feel like I got along with you like right away talking to you. You know what I mean? And it's fun. It's nice to meet people like that. You know, especially with like what you do. A lot of times you get some attitude, you know, but definitely I highly recommend people talk. Well, you probably don't everybody talk to me, but but you're a great guy to talk to, man. You're fun. You're real upfront with your information, and I appreciate that, and I think a lot of other people probably do too.
So. I appreciate that. You know, I think as far as self-defense goes, that's like your best tool, is just be able to talk to people on all different levels. Because if you can kind of talk your way out of a situation, or just be friendly or understanding enough, a lot of times you can avoid some of these little scuffles that you don't want to get in anyway. So I think I appreciate you saying that, because that's something I work hard on, is try to be genuine and kind enough that and communicate as well as I can, so that I can avoid situations. So
yeah, that's good. That's something I probably need to work on a little better. So, but well, Adam, I don't want to take up too much more of your time. I know I know you've had a busy past couple of weeks, and you probably want to just relax. So I do really appreciate you taking the time to jump on here and just do this little interview with me, and spread some of that information. And I'll definitely post links to Spartan Mode. There's no link yet for the gunting, but definitely be on the lookout for that. So, but again, I really do appreciate you taking the time to come on with me and share some of this information. And no problem. And I definitely look forward to possibly seeing you at Blade Show West. So go ahead and hit pause here and stop recording, and then we'll finish up.